We just got this. We are going to meet, and I have to leave at 1:30. I believe maybe the pro tem does as well, I'm not sure. And so we're going to start with the bottle bill, which is H158, and then if we have time, spin out H175, modernizing prevention programs, which is, I think, a fairly quick bill. There's no changes, I don't think, according to government operations reporter. So I'm going to ask, I don't know, Mike O'Grady or the reporter of the bill from Natural Resources to give us kind of a quick run through. We're getting this, I gather, because, because there is money involved, and that has to do with how the anticipated SG revenues would be apportioned. And then we do have the amendment from finance that has a requirement for A&R to contract with an independent third party, but there's no money to go with that. So maybe since Mike is still here, why don't you come up, Mike, and we'll run through this quickly.
Okay, do you just want me to focus on the appropriations aspects or the whole bill?
Well, I'll defer to the committee. If you want to go through, we can go through what this does just in a very high level in terms of what it, I understand that obviously there's some expansion. There's also some maybe trigger points and what it's going to take infrastructure to support this approach. And then we've got the amendment. So maybe if you could give us sort of that context.
Sure.
For which we're going to be considering the money.
Okay, so the bill expands the scope of the beverage container system to all containers made out of metal, certain types of plastic, and glass. And the beverage is anything that's fit for human consumption as a liquid, except for milk, dairy products, plant-based beverages, infant formula, meal replacement drinks, and non-alcoholic cider. And that expansion goes into effect in 27. Prior to that, the bill requires what is called a Product Responsibility Organization, the PRO, to register with A&R, get approved by A&R, and implement a collection plan for all of the containers that are subject to the bottle redemption, beverage redemption system. Now, where the funding comes in is that I believe you all know about the abandoned beverage container deposits, often called the escheats. And a few years ago, they were just going, the manufacturers and distributors were just holding them. And you said that they had to return them to the state and you had them deposited into the Clean Water Fund. Well, the Producer Responsibility Organization that is going to be implementing the collection plan has requested that during the first few years, if not entirely, that they retain the abandoned beverage container deposits. So that is not what your body, your committee did, or what the House did. Instead of letting the PRO retain all of the beverage, the escheats, a portion of those escheats go back to the PRO. So it changes, and you can see that in the House passed version of the bill beginning in section 2. So when the PRO first starts, it's under the existing scope of the beverage container system, not the expanded scope, under the existing scope. They get to retain the first $3 million goes into the Clean Water Fund. And that's intended so that the Clean Water Fund doesn't lose revenue that it's made whole. And then anything over $3 million, the PRO gets to retained. It gets returned to the PRO for their use in implementing the collection plan. Then when the beverage container system expands, the scope expands, you'll see on section 3 that the first 4 million goes into the clean water fund and the PRO retains the rest of the abandoned beverage container deposits. And that's because the scope of the bill of beverage container redemption is going to be so much larger. There's an estimate of additional sheets in those first few years. Now, the PRO under both the House passed and the Senate recommended would only get to keep or get any portion of the sheets until 5 years after implementation of the plan. And at that point, what happens is that annually, the Clean Water Fund gets $4 million or 50% of the sheets, whichever is greater, and the rest gets deposited into the Solid Waste Management Assistance Account, which is the account that's used by municipal solid waste entities to do things like implement recycling and other solid waste management requirements. So that is how this money moves. There are multiple reports and analyses that are in the bill, as well as the chair referenced. The Senate Finance Committee has the Agency of Natural Resources hiring an independent consultant. You did not appropriate money for them in the past. A&R has hired an independent consultant to do similar studies, and you haven't appropriated money for them either. It's likely going to be the same consultant that does this systems analysis. And I have not heard A&R request any money to do a systems analysis. The other reports are just agency reports from the agency reporting on the annual beverage container redemption rate for the 3 categories, reporting back in 26 whether or not the system that has been set up by the PRO provides adequate convenience for redemption, whether or not there's additional infrastructure needed, and any other recommendations prior to the expansion of the scope of the beverage container redemption system. So that's effectively the bill. There's a lot of other things that go on in this bill, like labeling, requiring containers to have the UPC codes and barcodes so that they're easily scannable, increasing the handling fee that manufacturers pay to redemption centers and retailers that redeem for non-commingled containers, those that aren't already part of an agreement for their common collection.
Could I ask you a question? Right now, do we have what is called that PRO in place? I know that we have, it's an out-of-state entity that the returnables go to. Is that a PRO? In extended producer responsibility terms, yeah, TAMRA is probably, if not a PRO, then it is a consultant that's implementing EPR style requirements for it. But this is going to go beyond that. It will require all the manufacturers to participate in this PRO and to implement a common plan so that everyone gets the same services, whether or not you're commingled or not commingled, whether or not you are small or large. So that is, and it shifts the cost to that PRO because the PRO is required as part of the plan to provide for free redemption. Now, will that cost be shifted to the consumer in the marketplace? Probably. But that is, the PRO has not been set up yet. What is operating now, TAMRA, is technically kind of
of a EPR entity, but you could also say that they're just a consultant implementing a company.
Any questions?
So,
Yes.
so how much is it gonna cost? Did they get any cost figures at the consumer level? What this would cost consumers when they purchase a jar of mayonnaise or?
No, well, mayonnaise, I hope isn't something that's intended for liquid consumption.
But it has to be drinkable.
Yeah, liquid mayonnaise.
Salad.
But this and orange juice is a dairy container in plastic that would be covered, and it's currently not covered. And so that what will be passed on to the consumer, an estimate of that, I think that's hard to say right now. It'd probably be impossible to determine because they haven't implemented this. They haven't even started to set up the system. They have to develop this plan, and under the plan then set up the system for redemption, because there's convenience requirements for redemption built in. There needs to be at least 3 redemption sites per county that provide for immediate refund to the consumer. There has to be at least one in any city with 7,000 people or more. And then there's a general overall standard that there has to be effective, convenient redemption for everyone in the state. And A&R will have to make that determination.
And what if there's not? Is it a trigger, like nothing, something else doesn't happen?
No, I mean, it's basically what A&R needs to do is they need to review the proposed plan and say, hey, this isn't going to provide the necessary convenience. You have to provide additional redemption in these areas or in that area, et cetera.
If they don't.
And if they don't, then they're subject to the prohibition. They won't be able to sell their product in the state.
So it's not a trigger for the deposit to be placed on these items or for it to go up.
No, there was an automatic escalator in the bill on the deposit that was proposed for removal by Senate Finance this morning. What that would have been tied to would have been the redemption rate for there's 3 categories of containers. There's varnished beverages, liquor bottles, and everything else. And so A&R is going to report on those redemption rates each year. Previously, in the House passed version, if a category did not reach the goal, and there's goals built into the program, in 2 years in a row, then the deposit automatically escalated by 5 cents. But only one time. You can only have a one-time escalation. That I think was a concern to manufacturers and others, retailers, retail associations, and Senate Finance removed that escalator. A&R also didn't like it because it would have put the onus on them to make a determination that it had to escalate. And that was something that we did.
So, right now, Tom, I'm trying to take this with some previous conversations. This is not new. Senator Aluzzi actually wanted to expand what was subject to deposit. He withdrew the amendment because of additional information that the investments that our recycling entities had made, which are fairly significant, needed a volume of recycled material to support their investment. Tamara exports the recycle out of state. Do they go to recycling out of state? In other words, are we still getting to recycling? Just how many different steps along the way? What does Tamara do with what they have now?
Well, if they can sell it on the commodities market, they sell it on the commodities market, and which they do.
Which would be recycled commodities.
Right, it's aluminum, plastic.
I mean, the days of where you brought the bottles back and then washed them and reused them are long gone. You know, back when you had the Coke bottles and we all have them as antiques, you know, on our window shelf.
There are markets for for aluminum, it's probably the most profitable PET and HDPE. Glass, it generally has to be clean glass, and there are
It's a
facilities,
limited, yeah.
in order to recycle that regionally and nationally. I think Casella ships their glass to North Carolina, but there's glass facilities in Quebec and I think one in New York. But going back to your question is, yes, there was infrastructure that was implemented to deal with the Universal Recycling Law from 2012, and such as material recovery facilities, the MRFs. And there is estimated from the MRFs that they will lose a percentage of the volume of those materials that were going to them, because they will now have consumers will now have an incentive to take those in for redemption, and they will then be managed by the PRO instead of the MRF. Now, there was at one point a concept that the PRO would negotiate with these MRFs for the services or that they would be provided, but that is not in the bill anymore. Instead, they're a part of the systems analysis is a look at how the MRFs will be affected. And then you will have information that will inform if you want to do anything about MRFs and loss of revenue to MRFs. But currently, there's nothing dictating that they be made whole. They do predict that they will lose revenue and therefore will likely have to increase fees to make their facilities viable as they were built.
So there's no specific appropriation here.
No.
Further questions?
Yes, I have a number.
Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Sears, I forget. I apologize. Yes.
Oh, no problem. My first question actually is follow up to that. There is money involved here. The Clean Water Fund, it looks like it loses money later on down the road.
Not necessarily, no, because the concept is that the Clean Water Fund shall remain at least at $3 million for 50% of what is returned as a sheets. Actually, at least at $4 million or what is returned as in the sheets. So that the Clean Water Fund is not getting $4 million right now. It's getting around 2.3 to 2.8.
Mike, and I have another question. On page 19 of the House passed version, section 1536, antitrust conduct authorized. And you just talked about containers going out of state. How can you do this without running afoul of interstate commerce laws, as well as, I would think this is ripe for a challenge by the beverage container groups.
So the antitrust provision is included in the bill because PROs, they are directed to work together. And when they're working together to develop this plan, it looks like they're colluding, but they're not. They're basically just setting up the plan. And the antitrust provision says that they can't use this immunity to set prices or fix market area, et cetera, the traditional collusion prohibited activities. This language has been included in every extended producer responsibility program that Vermont has enacted. It's been reviewed by the Attorney General, at least the previous Attorney General's administration, and they are okay with this language as it relates to immunizing the manufacturers from state antitrust law. The state cannot immunize them from federal antitrust law. Now, as to the Commerce Clause, what you are regulating is the sale of the beverage containers in the state and their redemption in the state. What the manufacturers do with the containers after they can get them back is not regulated by this bill. They can do with it what they want within the framework of what's the law. So you're not regulating or saying that they can't redeem them out of state, or that they have to redeem them out of state, or they have to pay a certain surcharge. So all you're saying is, in order to sell a product within Vermont, whether or not the product was made here or made elsewhere, so it's facially non-discriminatory, that they have to set up a program for the collection of their waste. It's what you have done for batteries, for mercury lamps, for e-waste, for paint. I am not aware of an EPR program that's been challenged on Commerce Clause grounds. And I don't think this one violates the Commerce Clause either.
Other questions, Senator Sears?
Yeah, I do. Well, it's actually a comment. I think most of my constituents who've written me to support this bill have no clue that it doesn't just, they think it just increases the items that are subject to the deposit, water, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, once again, we create one of these mammoth redemption, what do we call them? Consumer producer responsibility organizations. And I don't understand why we seem to complicate everything beyond belief. The problem really is the collection of the containers. The problem is that, people throw stuff out the window of their car or whatever, and they end up, you don't get them back. But that's what we've been dealing with for years. But we create these complicated things. The question really should be, do you want to move to putting a deposit on water, orange juice bottles, Gatorade, et cetera, yes or no? But it isn't that simple. And that frustrates me. This is the same convoluted system we had last time, I think. A little simpler to understand, but it's still convoluted in my opinion.
Okay. Senator Lyons, you had a question.
Right. Well, I think Senator Sears is getting at the issue around what the consumer is paying versus what the manufacturer is responsible for. So was there discussion in the committee about having some precautions about the additional costs that come to consumers as the PROs are established and their work is ongoing?
So the Senate Finance Committee and the systems analysis, which is going to come back to you, when does that come back? That comes back it comes back January 15, 2025. So before the PRO is required. And it's basically what that systems analysis will do. The Senate Finance Committee required that it look at the cost to consumers of complying with an expanded beverage container redemption system, including transportation costs, compliance costs, carbon income, and externalities such as lost time. So that will have to be modeled by the agency with their independent consultant, but you will have an estimate of what it will cost consumers under an expanded.
But in the meantime, this would move forward just with
In the meantime, yes, it would.
What's the estimate for the total amount of we're gonna see more consumers putting down their 10 or 20 or how many other cents, and then how many bottles are we going to see, and what's the total reimbursement that we're going to see that goes to the PRO? Do we have that estimate? So didn't see it in the fiscal note.
Well, Dan did the best that I think he could do. with the estimate of expansion. There is, basically, he focused on the sheets.
Yes.
And about, they're basically calculating an additional 1.1 billion.
That's sort of presenting it as, this is a method to increase revenues as opposed to some other policy goals.
It's not, the policy goal is to improve redemption, improve recycling, bring more material into a recycling system through incenting that recycling with a deposit. That's the overall policy goal. The revenue is just a secondary effect of that expansion.
Other comments? Okay, so, can I ask one more?
Ask one,
Or
sure, and
Just a
either
comment, just a comment.
make a comment, and then I guess we're not gonna relitigate the bill. I think people have feelings about what the bill will do. Senator Sears, the infrastructure, the complication, the number of steps you have from taking it from here to recycling, and the cost and the impact in a variety of ways. So I think those questions are kind of been, those concerns have been raised in the questions to date. So Senator Lyons and then Senator Starr.
Right, just a quick comment. I did hear that my solid waste district will be negatively affected by this significantly. And was there any discussion about how to include the current system, recycling system within this program?
Well, yes. The current system could be part of this collection plan that the PRO could negotiate with existing transfer stations,
But it's not
redemption sites. It's not specifically required that they use the MRF or et cetera. No, it is not.
So are we gonna see, so I won't go there. It's the same question about a new infrastructure.
Senator Starr, and then we'll just have to, we're not gonna be moving on an appropriation, in per se. So
No, the only question I have is that, now you have stuff that goes to the trash site, that's picked up at your house. Then you have your recycle stuff that goes to recycle, which, we hope all do. And then you have your redeemables that you take back to the local store. Well, are we gonna get a fourth one now that we gotta go to, or will the redemption centers, like where we take our bottles, instead of taking the wine bottles up to recycle, you'd be able to take those with your bottles to the redemption center. And I mean, it doesn't sound like there's a fourth place you're gonna have to go with your stuff, so.
well, hopefully not the roadside.
But the other thing,
But that's a different,
Yeah.
that's,
but it would be kind of nice to know what it's gonna cost our consumers, that we have to answer to. Is it gonna cost them money, or are they gonna get their money back when they take the bottles back, or what, plastic?
so
So.
we are gonna have to move the bill. Somebody can move it favorably, we can move it without recommendation, because it doesn't carry an appropriation, and then people will vote the way they feel they want it, and from a policy perspective. So, Senator Bruin.
I will move the bill favorably.
Second. Did you say you had? Oh, you have, let's go through it.
Senator Brooke,
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator Purchase.
Yes.
Senator Sears,
No.
Senator Starr,
Yes.
Senator Westman, yes, Senator Kitchell,
No,
and Senator Lyons.
I think I might have
Okay, Thank
Well
you.
done.
I live on the Connecticut side of the river. If you want to see an impact, it's going to be on where people buy. And then you start making all.
Well, it'll also be on who's picking up the trash and how much that's gonna cost.
I know, it's,
People are gonna be doing it, and it's also it's gonna affect our big merch.
I know, that's why I voted the way I did, because the implications are pretty significant to get this to recycling. That's really
We
what.
do a nice job.
What? They do. I think we have, you know. So I'm looking at it from a different, depending on where you live in the state, the economic impact is going to be experienced differently.
I got calls from every redemption center up north supporting it.
Well, because it's business their way. That's what it is. So we will move on to prevention programs.
This wasn't our committee, what committee?
No, it came through government operations. And
Judiciary.
Judiciary.
The Senate version was from judiciary.
okay, well, we're on H-175. And so there's a Senate version of this as well.
Passed it.
Okay,
I
so
think, didn't we?
Yes,
Michelle?
the Senate Judiciary agreed with the House version. So there's no separate Senate Judiciary amendment.
okay, so this was, oh, I'm sorry, this was Senator Norris presenting on behalf of Judiciary, not
Yeah.
GovOps.
Yeah.
All right, so he asked me if we were going to be taking this up, and I said if we had time today, we would. He said there was no changes, and I gather we have it because there must be some kind of per diem or something like that. Michelle, can you?
Yeah, so what the bill does is it makes amendments to the Children and Family Council for Prevention Programs within DCF to comply with the Federal Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act of 1973 and its updates in 2018. And so it was just kind of some housekeeping things around changing the name. It did change the composition of the group from 21 to 25 members. But there is a fiscal note on that I think you have on your website, and the costs are considered to be negligible. And that was the only potential cost associated with it.
Okay.
So it's just, changes the name of the group to the Council for Equitable Youth Justice. It changes the membership from 21 to 25 members, same way that they come to be on the council. They're appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. And their job is just to help with the state complying with the core requirements of federal law.
All right, sounds pretty straightforward, and all we have is the 4 additional members. So Senator Westman's moving the bill. Okay.
Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Senator Purchase,
Yes.
Senator Sears,
I think he said yes.
Yes,
I'm doing lip reading and it said yes, but he's muted.
it doesn't show him.
are you yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Senator Starr,
Yes.
Senator Westman, yes, Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
and the recorder.
for appropriations. Is that, a DCF? That's you?
No, that's judiciary.
Well, it's a DCF
Is it
council.
DCF?
Yeah,
No, it's you.
I'll do
Should be pretty easy.
it. Should be easy as pie.
Okay, so, we are, finished here. Two of us, three of us have got to stay for the committee of conference, which is now scheduled at 2:30. So I'm going to adjourn appropriations committee for today. And we still have, two bills that we got today.
Well, we moved one of them just now.
We moved the bottle bill, so we have, and we moved 175, which was scheduled for tomorrow, so
We have the 125 boards and commissions still. We've got 270 amendments to medical adult use cannabis programs. And
okay, so it shouldn't be two, okay.